She was never meant to be a revolutionary. Not in the eyes of the law, not in the eyes of the men who wrote it. But Susan B. Anthony didn't wait for permission to speak. She demanded it. And in doing so, she changed America forever. Born in 1820 into a Quaker family that believed in justice and equality, Susan B. Anthony was raised on principles that set her apart. But even those ideals didn't prepare her for the uphill battle ahead. At just 26 years old, Susan began teaching but quickly discovered the cruel disparity between male and female wages. She earned just a fraction of what her male colleagues made. And when she protested, she was told, "This is just the way things are." But that answer never satisfied Susan B. Anthony. She spoke out at a time when women weren't supposed to speak at all. She organized meetings, wrote petitions, and traveled across the country on muddy roads, in cold trains, in front of hostile crowds. She didn't just knock on the doors of power, she barged in. And in 1872, Susan did the unthinkable. She voted in a US presidential election. She knew the consequences. And still, she cast her ballot. Not for herself, but for every woman who had been silenced. She was arrested, dragged into court, told she had no right to speak in her own defense. The judge fined her $100. She never paid, she never apologized, and she never backed down. At the time, many laughed at her, some feared her, most ignored her, but she kept going, speech after speech, town after town. For over 40 years, Susan B. Anthony lived not for comfort, but for change. She didn't live to see the 19th Amendment ratified. She died in 1906, to 14 years before women gained the right to vote. But it was her fingerprints on that law, her fire in its words, her spirit in every vote cast by a woman today. Susan B. Anthony wasn't just a reformer, she was a revolution, a storm wrapped in a skirt and spectacles. And when she said, "Failure is impossible," it wasn't a prediction. It was a promise. Today, we remember her not just as a suffragist, but as one of the fiercest voices for freedom this country has ever known. We vote today not just because we can, but because Susan B. Anthony once stood alone, so that no woman ever would again. Every time we check a box on a ballot, every time we raise our hands in protest, every time a girl in school says, "I want to be president someday," we're living the legacy of a woman who once stood in a courtroom and said, "It was not a crime, but simply exercising my right as a citizen of the United States." She knew the Constitution, she knew her worth, and she knew that someday, America would catch up to her courage. Her body lies beneath that cold stone in Rochester, but her spirit, it marches on, in every vote, in every voice, in every fight for freedom. Susan B. Anthony showed us that history doesn't move on its own. It moves because people push it forward, because they refuse to sit still, because they believe in a future they may never see but build anyway. And maybe that's the real mark of a hero. She couldn't be silenced. She won't be forgotten. Susan B. Anthony never lived to see the 19th Amendment ratified. She never saw a woman walk into a polling booth with no fear, no hesitation. She died 14 years too early. But her fingerprints are on every single ballot cast by a woman. She didn't fight just for herself. She fought for daughters she would never meet, for generations who would speak her name without even knowing her face, for a country that, one day, might finally live up to its own promises. Those were her final public words. Failure is impossible. Not because victory was guaranteed, but because giving up was never an option. She taught us that justice doesn't come all at once. It comes by standing firm, speaking loud, and never backing down, no matter how long it takes. She believed a woman's voice mattered. And today, it echoes through every hall of power, every protest chant, every vote cast in freedom. Susan B. Anthony didn't wait for history to remember her. She carved her name into